Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay with us as the Suns get set to shine.
Here's Perry, to Gar-Hurd. Here's the jump shot.
Jump to Marley, a long three. He got him! He got him! Into Booker. Here's the three. Suzanne! Rivers for Charles, and he flies in for a wham, bam, slam. Whammo time! He got it! Suzanne! Oh, brother!
Welcome to 7 Seconds or Less, a podcast about the NBA and the Phoenix Suns. My name is Max McCauley, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host. His name is David Nash. David, what's going on, dude?
Not a lot, Max. Another Monday morning for me, but NBA basketball is almost here. So how are you doing? I know the Cardinals just won, so you're probably feeling pretty good, but how are you feeling about basketball almost being upon us?
Yeah, I'm excited about it, actually. I've been distracted by football because the Cardinals are somewhat competitive for the first time in a little while. But I'm excited for basketball to start. You know, basketball's my favorite sport. The Suns are my favorite team. So, you know, it's just going to be nice to have them back in our lives.
It is. It's exciting to put some final predictions down for this episode, and then I'm super excited for some real action to actually talk about on the podcast. It feels like it has been forever, which it basically has, but the season has rolled around pretty quickly here too.
Yeah, somebody was saying, it feels like it was 3 years ago when the Raptors won the title. It's just nuts how it just happened. But yeah, we're going to do some predictions today. We're going to do both some Suns-based stuff. We're also going to do some league-wide stuff. Should be good. We're trying to mix up the Suns part, so we're not talking about the same stuff we've been talking about. We think we have some new stuff here, David. But before we get into that, how about a little bit of a recap?
Yeah, we can go over some news very quickly since the last episode. The Suns, first of all, got the roster down to 15 plus Jared Harper as the 16th man, or the one two-way slot. So we say goodbye to David Kramer, Odiase, and Owens from Texas Tech. They're all waived, and neither of them surprisingly took the second two-way spot, which was a little bit of a surprise to me at least. But there were two more games since the last episode as well, Max. And overall, we went 2-2 over the 4 games that we have. But going backwards to cover those ones, we lost to Denver 102-107. There was the giant win against Portland, 134-118, which I'm sure will come up a little bit as we go through this one. The loss to Sacramento, which was pretty ugly, 88-105, and they started off with that win versus Minnesota, 111-106. So 2-2, as I said, but we're going to get all into it a little bit more very soon. But what was your initial reaction, I guess, to the 4 games that we played, Max?
Overall, they look more competent. They're competitive. I liked what I saw from them defensively, especially Devin Booker. I mean, they weren't good, but I like how they tried. That's a nice improvement. I think the biggest thing is the shooting, just the ability to do what they did in that Portland game. And look, they're probably never going to do that again this whole season.
Yeah.
But the fact that they could even do that, it was a potential. It's just something they didn't have the past couple of seasons. And obviously in the new NBA, it's always been important to be able to shoot. But in 2019, it's especially important to be able to shoot. And it looks like they can do that now, David.
Yeah, the effort, as you said, was pretty good, which you would hope for going into the preseason. Hopefully it lasts a little bit longer than I guess it did last season. But before we end, I've got to mention the Valley Boys pop-up shop from the other day, Max. It was a surprising turnout, at least to me, from what I saw online, and even some players getting involved and running through there. I saw they all got their own customized hoodies from Kelly as well. So that was a bit of a good news story from this week. And finally, if we jump forward a little bit, we play Sacramento, Denver, and the LA Clippers to start the season, and they'll likely all be done before we come back and podcast next. Although we hope to pod maybe twice during those first 3 games, Max. We'll see how we go.
Yeah, we're not going to promise anything. We'd hope to do a little mini recap of the opening night game if we have a chance to. If not, we'll do a recap of all 3, like you said. So looking forward to it. Not the easiest start to the season. I think all 3 of those teams are pretty good. So We'll see about that. But let's go ahead and get into opening night. What do you, David, think the opening night starting 5 is going to be? Is it set in stone that we thought it was going to be all offseason?
I think it is, Max, and there was an interesting quote from Brendan Clean tweeted out this week from Monty Williams, who said, being in that starting lineup at the 3 spot for us. That's a huge position if he can knock down shots and attack, going to guard the toughest wing every night. I hoped that would be about Mikal Bridges, Max, but that was about none other than Kelly Oubre. So I think Rubio, Booker, Oubre, Saric, and Ayton is going to be our opening night starting 5. Do you disagree with that? Maybe in philosophical terms, but maybe not in logical terms?
I definitely disagree with them doing it. I agree that they're going to do it. I thought both Mikal and Oubre had really interesting preseasons. Oubre was a bit of a disaster at times, but also kind of an engine of the offense at times, which lends more evidence to our argument that he should be on the bench and then helping that unit score. But Mikal also, he had moments where he was sort of dominating the game. He looked physically different than he looked last year. It's very obvious he was in the gym all off season. Players always say that, but I believe. But he also had moments where we kind of did the same thing last year, where he was a little deer in the headlights out there. Some of the three-point shooting was uneven. I know that bothers you. It bothers all of us. So I don't know. I think I get why Monty's going with Oubre in the starting lineup. I just think he wants to have 5 guys on the floor who are all highly confident NBA basketball players. And I think that's probably his reasoning. I think he's worried about Mikal Bridges getting a little deer in headlights-y at times.
Yeah, I think that was the main thing that stood out to me from the quote. He mentions the word attack and obviously knocking down shots, which Kelly and Mikal didn't do great between the two of them in the preseason. Obviously a little bit interrupted for the both of them as well, and that's where we might see Cam a little bit more than what we expected, because he is a reliable shooter, which the other two can be a little bit streaky. So I think that's going to be the big storyline between the two of them, is kind of who's shooting the better percentages, particularly from outside, because if they're passing up or missing a lot of open shots, Monty might be forced to make a change. But that attacking and the guarding the toughest wing every night, I think ironically, as you said, Bridges looked a hell of a lot stronger, and I thought attacked really well at times in the preseason. But Monty's going to go with the, I guess, older guy, even though he's not that old here in Kelly, and probably loves his confidence and ability to attack. We saw him get to the line a hell of a lot during the preseason, which, as you said, I actually like more in the second unit, but I think they're probably going to go with him with the starters here. But you look at the first 10 games and that kind of question about guarding the toughest wing every night. You've got Sacramento, Denver, the Clippers, probably without Paul George, Utah, Golden State, Memphis, Philly, Miami, Brooklyn, and the Lakers, obviously, with LA. But, the thing that stood out, you're right, it's a tough, start to the season, but there's not a lot of those star wings in those 10 teams. They're more big, heavy, which is another conversation with the starters altogether. But, Kelly might not have too many tough assignments and a relatively easy start to the season for him in terms of defending every night, Max.
It'll be interesting to see what they do with him, because I could see them playing Kelly Oubre on the best guard in other teams sometimes. Against Houston, they did that, and it worked really well. He actually did a good job on Harden. So I could see that being a thing. Like, it won't shock me if we see a little bit of him on De'Aaron Fox. He's not quick enough to stay with De'Aaron Fox all game, so it's not going to be like his assignment, but I could see him switching over.
Not many people are.
No one is. Yeah, that's a good point. You can't stay with De'Aaron Fox. But yeah, I think it's interesting to see that. Yeah, and I think the overall point here with these two guys is that they're both kind of uneven. It's just when Kelly's uneven, when he's in bad, he's still attacking. He's not lost, whereas Mikal can get a little bit lost. So one guy that I thought had a really interesting preseason, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on how he's going to factor in, because he doesn't have an obvious spot on this team, but I think his play justifies he needs to be out there, and that's Frank Kaminsky. He was a bit of a revelation in preseason. He probably was maybe the most, I don't know about most valuable player, but most impressive player compared to what we thought he was. The dude shot the lights out. Dude had an 8-assist game. I thought he competed okay on defense, which was a pretty big surprise. He's not good or anything, but he was competing. He kind of looked like somebody the classic in a new place, fresh start guy. I think he had a quote to that effect. He said something like he feels like a new person, that everything feels different here than it did in Charlotte. So, I don't know. How excited are you? Is this a preseason mirage, or are you legitimately excited for Frank? And where do you think he's going to fit in?
I mean, I'm excited for Frank. I think, as you said, he had some quotes post leaving Charlotte that he wasn't that happy with kind of how he was used and how much time he got. And then, as you said, he's had one after the preseason here where he just seems happy. My biggest concern, not to kind of beat a dead horse here, is they're playing him as the backup 4, and as you look at the rotation, that's where he's going to be getting his minutes. His 8 assists in that Portland game that you mentioned, surprisingly, when I went back through and watched, they were all when he was playing the 5. His defensive, okay film at time is generally when he's at the 5, and I think shooting the ball, he's most effective, drawing the center out as the 5 as well. So my biggest concern with him is you've got to find him minutes, because he's hot at the moment, he's shooting well, he's playing well across the board, and a pretty balanced game. But it actually seemed to be more in those games when Ayton wasn't playing, and when he wasn't playing with Baines. They had a little bit of okay chemistry, but he was better when Cam was like a stretch 4, I guess, and also Šarić was playing the 4 with him as well. So that's going to be a big thing to watch for me for the start of the season, is can he, I guess, keep that hot streak going when, he's probably only going to get his minutes at the 4. They tinkered with things a little bit more in the preseason, but you'd expect Ayton to, play 32 to 35 minutes a night, and for Baines to deserve all those backup 5 minutes. So, do we get in a tricky spot where, it's one of Baines or Kaminsky playing, which, Baines will get banged up at times, and it's going to be great to have Kaminsky as another option there. But yeah, I'm just not sure about his fit at the power forward slot, Max.
Yeah, I don't think it's optimal, especially defensively. I think Baines and Kaminsky can be okay offensively together because they can both shoot. But, it's definitely not optimal. You make a key point there, which is Baines is probably not going to stay healthy all season. I'd be very surprised if he played 82 games. So there's going to be some time for Frank to slot in at the 5, I think. And, there might be some matchups in some games where it just makes more sense to play Frank than Baines in certain lineups. So I could see that happening a little bit. It's going to be interesting. I'm glad Monty has options because this is not a team that has had roster options in the past. It's fun to talk about a player who impressed us and how he might not be able to find minutes. That's a weird thing in Suns. If you impress us at all for the Suns, you got minutes in the old days.
Yeah, we've said that pretty much since the July signings, is that there is some depth to this team finally. And you do get injuries and you do get competitiveness. And, one thing for me is, we'll get into it when we get into the full rotation in a bit, but, there's going to be pressure on some guys to perform or lose their spot. And that only means good things for the overall chemistry and competitiveness of the team. One thing we didn't mention before that I don't think we've really touched on from the preseason, it does kind of tap into that Kelly guarding guards, as you said before, Max, is they've really looked to hide Booker on the worst matchup, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I think it means that we've seen him give more effort in those matchups. I tried to highlight things after the last game where he showed a bit of effort, but I think a great point by you where they've got both Mikal and Kelly to slot over. They've even got guys like Tyler Johnson and Rubio's taking most of the point of attack defense as well. But they've really shifted those 1 to 3 positions around quite a bit and been willing to cross-match guys to get the best out of their defense, which I think is a bit of a shift from last year. Igor, not known as a great defensive coach in general, but he also wasn't all that creative on that end, I don't think. They kind of played teams just pretty much straight up, and that wasn't great for Booker from night to night when he was healthy.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point by you. You really need to hide Booker, especially because in the preseason, Booker he didn't have his pedal fully to the metal. I wouldn't say offensively, but once the regular season starts, we're going to be seeing him put up, his customary 20-plus shots. So he's going to be needing to take rests on defense. I hope the effort stays there. I think it'll probably wax and wane. It's just too hard to play defense when you have that kind of load. The load will be less than it was before, but it's still going to be a lot. I think I saw a lot of people on Twitter a little concerned that Booker wasn't shooting very much. I wouldn't be concerned about that. It's going to change on starting opening night, I would imagine.
Yeah, and Monty had that great quote after the last game that they were essentially hiding stuff and not going with the full package because they know what they've got with Devin Booker, and they wanted to trial some other things, which I think you pointed out quite a lot on the pod and on Twitter. It seemed a lot of that trialing was Rubio and Ayton's chemistry and making sure they're on the same page. He got a little bit too short-sighted to Ayton at times. But who ends games here, Max? If that's the starting 5, we're going to get into the full rotation in a bit, but we've discussed quite a bit that your final lineup will quite often be different to your finishing one. So what do you think is going to be the optimal end lineup in most games here?
Most games, I think it's going to be the Mikal and Oubre lineup. Obviously, with Booker, Rubio, and Ayton around. But I do think it's going to vary a little bit. I would not be surprised to see Monty play who's playing well. Like, if Tyler Johnson's having a great game one game, wouldn't shock me at all to see him finish a game over Rubio in certain lineups. It wouldn't shock me to see Kaminsky in there sometimes if Kaminsky's hot. Wouldn't shock me to see a lot of things, honestly. Even people are going to hate to hear this. I don't think this is going to happen very often, but it wouldn't shock me if Ayton wasn't out there at the end of certain games if he just had a bad game with foul trouble or whatever. I think other than Devin Booker, there's basically no one who's definitely going to be out there every single time to close games. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'd almost throw Book in. I love that you've made this point because the last question I've got here is, will Monty have the balls to bench Rubio/Booker/Ayton? He has options. So, Booker's obviously only going to be if you need a defensive stop to end the game. They actually have guys now where Booker just shouldn't be on the court. It's just plain and simple. The only risk that you're running is maybe pissing him off by having him on the bench for a final possession. But that's where the question comes in. Will Monty have the balls to do it? I think, as you said, Rubio's the easiest one, if there's a guy like Tyler Johnson that's playing really well to bench. But yeah, even Ayton, we saw it in the preseason. He didn't take one single three, even after all that talk in the offseason about how he was going to take them. And the offense looked awesome at times with either Baines or Frank at the top of the key drawing the center out. So, I don't think we can rule it out that if they need a three or they need a bucket, Ayton might be the guy that needs to be sat at the end of the game. And that's just the cold, hard facts until he is a knockdown guy, because both Baines and Frank are showing that they're pretty capable of hitting that top of the key three at least and stretching the offense out a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't want listeners to freak out. People already think we're too low on Ayton. We're not saying that this is going to be a commonplace thing. It may not even happen. It just strikes us both as a possibility. Let's go into the rotation a little bit. You have down here, I may have missed this quote, that Monty said that there should be a 10-man rotation. Outside of... Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so he's made two comments here. He's made a top four comment around there being a core four, but he left it kind of open-ended and said he's got to figure it out. So not necessarily saying he knows who the core four are, and that he wants two of those core four to be on the court at all times, which kind of helps our stagger argument that we've been banging on about a bit. But yeah, pretty much since the day that preseason started, he's also mentioned a 10-man rotation, which is interesting. It means that at least one or two guys that we saw pretty regularly in the preseason are going to miss out if he sticks to that, Max.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, like we've been saying, kind of a theme of the podcast now. It's going to be who's playing well, I think, who's going to get the minutes. I think the most interesting thing is going to be see what do Cam Johnson and Ty Jerome do. I kind of feel like the way he's going to play that is to have them get little early second quarter stints, and if they're good, they get to come back, and if they're bad, they don't, would be my guess. At least to start, to see what he has in them. One of them may play themselves into being a regular part of the rotation. One of them may play themselves into not being part of the regular rotation. But as far as the core four thing goes, I mean, he may not definitively know, but my guess, it's got to be Rubio, Booker, Oubre, and Ayton, right?
I would think so. You kind of go with your four most important players, and I had it down here to ask who you think that is. I think we probably both agree that Bridges should have a chance to be in there as the fourth guy. The thing that really kind of piqued my attention before we then got the quote about Kelly as the starting three was, would be a good way to kind of feed Kelly's ego a little bit by having him come off the bench, but tell him he's, part of the core four and is going to be one of four guys that are on the court at all times, basically. And, what we saw in the preseason with him willing to attack as the, I guess, lead guy in a second unit, I still think that would be the smarter way to go, even though we're saying that's probably not going to happen here. But yeah, I think your point is valid on Cam and Ty. I've got Cam in the 10-man rotation right now and Ty out of it. I'm sorry to you and all the Ty Jerome fans out there. But the one note that I've got is, he'll be putting a ton of pressure on Tyler Johnson, which I just didn't expect before the preseason started. And I think Tyler probably gets it, as the vet, so to speak. Ty Jerome had some problems with turnovers and things, which you'd expect from a rookie point guard coming into his first season. I was banging on all last season. I think, Tyler Johnson had 40 assists to 10 turnovers or something in his 12 games for the Suns. So he kind of protects the ball. So I can see Monty going with the, more surefire, safe guy to start with. But, who do you think's at the biggest risk of falling out of the rotation? I've got four names here: Tyler, Šarić, Frank, and Baines. Is it Tyler? Is he kind of on the outside looking in, just when you look at most of the depth guys are guards?
I'll say that I don't think any of those guys is at a very large risk of falling out of the rotation at all. I think, Tyler Johnson's probably the one, but this team is going to be looking for consistent, steady play out of its complementary players. That's going to be the number one thing they're going to care about. So I agree with you. I think it makes more sense to have Cam in the rotation right away, because Cam, he's going to have nights where he's quiet, but you can trust him to shoot. You can trust him to apparently be in the right place on defense is what we're learning, which is nice. So I just think, you're going to get more steadiness out of him. Ty Jerome, higher upside than Tyler Johnson for sure, because Ty Jerome's actually kind of a real point guard.
Yes.
But like you said, at this stage of his career, he's going to be way up and down, and the Suns just can't afford a lot of up and down. They're going to be playing a lot of these games on the margins. They're going to be in a lot of close games, hopefully. So they're going to have to play guys who are not going to lose them games, and I think that's going to be Tyler Johnson. I think early on, Ty Jerome is not going to be that, but I'm hopeful for improvement, and that's why I think that he does have the best chance of displacing Tyler Johnson from the rotation, just because I can, as smart as Ty Jerome is, I could see him making marked improvements very quickly.
Yeah, a lot of deep teams in those first 10 games as well that we ran over before. Teams like Denver, the Clippers, Philly, Miami, a lot of vet guys in the second unit. So I could definitely see them going with the more surefire option. But that's going to be a storyline to watch early on in the season, because, if Ty Jerome plays how he did in the preseason, he's going to be asking for minutes for Monty. It may even mean that Monty has to change his stance a little bit on the 10-man rotation, or, as you said, be a little bit more flexible game to game and kind of ride the hot hands for certain guys, and it's just going to mean that some guys have to sit. But what's your favorite lineup, Max? If we kind of think about a 5-man lineup that we could get thrown out there in these first 10 games, what's a lineup you want to see the Suns use, because they have a little bit of depth that they can play around with now? It might be defensive, might be a spread offense type lineup. What are you looking forward to?
I think my favorite lineup, just to see, it'd be a terrible defensive lineup, but it's kind of an all-offense shooting lineup. I would love to see Ty Jerome, as you like to call him now, Devin Booker, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, and Frank Kaminsky. I mean, that team would be really, really, really good on offense, David.
That's how you get back to 24 threes again, maybe as a possibility, breaking that Portland one from the preseason. Because you just look at it. I was looking at some pick and roll stuff with Cam Johnson's threes so far in the preseason, and you kind of run a pick and roll with Cam on the weak side of the floor, and then I think in the ones that I was watching, it was Tyler Johnson and Frank on the strong side. It's just impossible to guard the pick and roll, even if it's Ayton rolling or Baines rolling towards the rim, because Cam Johnson was the one just getting wide open 3 looks, and he's going to hit most of them if you don't go out there and guard him. And if you do go out there and guard him and not go and tag the big, then one thing we have been very positive with DeAndre Ayton on is when he rolls and his touch on the roll. Once he gets the ball, it's pretty much a bucket every single time. So, that's going to be really interesting to watch. As you said, they've got some shooters now, so they can throw some really dangerous lineups out there that I think will actually benefit DeAndre Ayton more than anything. He didn't have that benefit last year. Teams started to sag off Ariza, Anderson at the start of the year. That would have been a big reason why Ayton didn't get the ball a lot of the time. A lot of people were frustrated at the point guard situation or at Igor for not getting him the ball, but it was also just the way the defense was allowed to play us, because we were, one of the worst shooting teams, if not the worst, I think, 3-point shooting team by the end of the season. So a very welcome change to this roster, I think, Max. Yeah,
at this stage of his career, Ayton is a dependent player offensively. He doesn't just face up and create, offense on his own. You can go out and do the post a little bit, but you still it's actually, as Suns guards proved last season, can be difficult to get the ball into the post in the NBA sometimes. So, the fact that he has good guard play around him, and not just good guard play around him, but guys like Šarić, guys like Cam Johnson, as you pointed out, guys who are just smart basketball players who can make the right pass, it's going to help him a lot, because he is not able to run an offense on his own. So let's go ahead and go on to the rest of the... So I have a question for you, David. Because this guy, Javon Carter, he played a lot in the preseason. He played a lot, David. He is not a point guard. he is just not. I don't know what he is. I guess he's like a defensive specialist, and one position defensive specialist who is, I guess, not a total train wreck on offense, although he kind of is. Do you think they were playing him that much to just see what they had in him, or how much are we going to see from him on opening night? Is he going to be like a 20-minute a game guy? Because that's not going to be something I want to see, David.
Yeah, it's a bit of a concern. It's definitely the other note that I had down with those, I guess, outside looking in guys being Tiger Rome, Carter, Diallo, LeCue, and Akobo. Again, essentially the 5 guys that aren't going to be a part of this 10-man rotation, at least in my opinion. If Carter's playing over Jerome, I'll be devastated because I just think that that's not the move that should be getting made. Definitely to extend it out to 11-man rotation. We didn't see a lot of Tyler Johnson, either through injury or just, poor form in a couple of his games. So I do think the Carter thing was getting him reps in case, we have a bad point guard situation to start the season. Say Rubio goes down for a bit, Tyler Johnson's not quite right to start the season, and they are leaning on Tiger Rome and Carter a little bit more. They wanted him to have the reps running the offense, but like you, I didn't love, what I saw in terms of him running the offense. He's a great defender and knocked down some shots at times too, which is great. But probably just had a little bit too much confidence in his shot-making ability and is just kind of a step behind on reads as a point guard, which is not what this team needs when they're trying to spread the floor and get the ball pinging around a little bit. So, yeah, I hope we don't see him. It was a little bit alarming that he got so much time and it wasn't just kind of second half running out there stuff. I can understand that Monty might have fallen in love with him a little bit as a defensive guy, particularly when you look up and down this roster. One, concern is the lack of defense from position to position. So, I would hope that his role on this team is that you throw him out for 10 minutes a night, maybe maximum, to just wreak havoc on an opposition guard that is, a De'Aaron Fox or, someone to just throw them off their groove a little bit. But, I would hope that we won't be seeing him as part of the regular rotation to start the season, Max.
Yeah, my issue with him is he's obviously a tenacious one-on-one defender, but he's not somebody you throw in and all of a sudden your defense is good. He can guard one guy. If the rest of your team is bad at defense, your team's going to be bad at defense. Javon Carter is not going to make the difference there. So I think this team's really going to have to be good, really good offensively. That's really their only chance to be, a 30-plus win NBA team. And, every minute Javon Carter's out there, I think is going to be a damper on the offense. I mean, we saw I don't remember which preseason game it was, but the one where Ty Jerome sort of took over the offense in the fourth quarter and looked incredible at the pick and roll. You're just not going to get that at Javon Carter. He's just not that kind of player. And that's why I think we, developing... Actually, and also Ty Jerome, he's not a good defender, David. He competed too.
He did, and he's got, size, which is one thing that Carter doesn't have. He's basically 6 foot. Ty Jerome's 6'5". He's literally, basically the same size as Devin Booker, who, again, not a great defender, but when you have size and you show effort, there is a little bit that you can do out there. Carter, as you said, I think perfect point by you. If you're throwing him out there to play defense, it probably means bad things. You might just want him to pick up 94 feet, for a couple of possessions. But, he was the worst player in terms of the 0.5 offense that keeps getting talked about amongst this rotation. He wasn't the guy that was pinging it around. He played hero ball a little bit too much. And, if he sticks, great. He's a great option to have, but when we're already having problems sticking to this 10-man rotation that Monty seems to want to roll out there, I certainly don't want him beating any of the guys out that I've got in the 10-man lineup right now. And then that doesn't even include Tiger Rome, who I would throw in there for sure over Carter. So, yeah, that's going to be one to watch in these first few games, Max. Hopefully next pod we're not complaining after the Sacramento mini pod that we might do that Carter was the first guard off the bench.
Oh, God. I don't want to live in that world, David. All right, let's get down to it. How many games, David, will the Phoenix Suns win this season?
Well, Monty has been a quote machine this week because he even made a comment about, if you're not playing for the playoffs, what are you playing for? Which I kind of love. You got to fight for it. And, I think he said people won't be around him too long if that's not what you're fighting for, which I love. So I'm going to stick with a prediction that I threw out a little while ago when Zona asked everyone for one of his articles. I'm going to stick with 33, but the more interesting question for me, which I'll let you answer after you give your total, is what's the kind of variance from floor to ceiling here? Because it's wide for me, Max. I would go as low as, probably 26, 27, and if you get me on a good day, I could go all the way up to 40.
Yeah, I was going to say 40 is the high end too. I could even see it get a little worse than that if there's a lot of injury problems, especially if it's involving Rubio and Booker. If those two miss extended time, especially together, it's going to be a bit of a disaster. So, let's just say, normal injury luck variance. I'd say you're probably about right. I'd say 25 to 40. It's hard to see them in this conference getting above 40. If they were in the East, I would say they could get 45. They could just shock some teams. There's a lot of bad teams in the East. We'll get to that later in our conference preview. The East is terrible. But yeah, I think I'm going to go 35 for them as a prediction. I'm pretty high on them. I just think their bench is going to be kind of good, David. I think that's one of the things that killed them so much in the past couple of seasons is their bench was just atrocious. They didn't have good players there. They had G Leaguers and guys who should have been in the NBA. They had Jamal Crawford coming in. Josh Jackson.
Totally killed them.
It just murdered them every single time. So now, sometimes their bench is going to be better than their starters. That's going to happen sometimes, and it's going to be so much different. It's going to lead to them not having these giant, gulfs to dig themselves out of. And then at the end of the day, it's just going to come down to luck in close games. And I just like them in close games. I think I like Devin Booker in close games. He's one of the better closers in the NBA. You just don't see it that often, but he generally is. I think of the Orlando game. Or a couple Memphis games I can think of where he's hit big shots down the stretch. The guy's money at the end of games, and I just think that's going to get us some of those marginal wins, push us up to 35. But there's not really much of a difference between 33 and 35, David.
Yeah, but it is interesting. We are going to get into this when we look at the West, but I think naturally people won't care about the final win total at the end of the year. They're going to look at where we sit as an overall seed, and whether we were competitive every night based on what we saw last year, where that just wasn't the case. But from 33 all the way up to 40, and we will get into it, that could place you anywhere in the bottom 7 teams in the West, or maybe on the doorstep of the playoffs. So that's going to be really interesting to watch. There's going to be storylines galore. I think for me, the biggest, factor, other than maybe Booker's health, is probably Ayton. I've been pretty hard on him this week and have copped a lot of hate on Twitter for pointing a few things out that people haven't, really liked. But, his play is going to be a massive, reason to whether the Suns are 30 wins or 40 wins, I think. So, that's why I'm really hard on him. To anyone that's listening, it's because I actually think he can be a massive factor on this team if he plays hard every night, and I actually really like his ability to raise the Suns' ceiling. But other than that, it's also, there's still not a lot of vets on this team. They went out and got Rubio and Baines, which adds to the very much older guys on this roster. But there's still a group of, Saric, Frank, Oubre, and even Tyler Johnson that have only had, between 3 and 5 years in the NBA. And, you're not going to count on the rookies to raise your ceiling, I wouldn't have thought. And you're probably not going to count on the vets, even though we know Rubio is really going to raise things from a point guard play perspective. But any improvement that they get out of that middle tier of guys is probably where that leap's going to come from, Max.
Yeah, I think those guys, I see them as being the reason why we win 35. That's the floor. That's what makes us a real NBA team. And you're dead on with DeAndre Ayton. If this team won 50 games, it's not going to happen. But say it happened, the reason why is because Ayton would be an all-star or near all-star. That's the only way that happens, because then you have Booker and Ayton as 2 stars, and that's what you need in the West to get up into that kind of range. Because look at the teams that we're going to go over pretty soon, the whole conference. The teams that are 1 through 6 or so, they have 2 stars or 3. Well, not 3 anymore. The era of 3 is dead, David. But they have 2, and the Suns don't have 2 right now. And the most likely candidate by far to be second for them is Ayton. I guess you'd say Mikal or Oubre is kind of the next people up to be the stars, but it's got to be the big man. It's got to be, and also not only does he have the most potential, but also his weakness is the fundamental Suns weakness. That anchoring that interior of our defense. If he can't do that at a reasonable level, their ceiling is just capped. It just is. You can't win a lot of games in the NBA if your center can't play defense.
Yeah, you talk about luck at the end of close games. The luck does come into a lot of it with shots either falling in or out. But you've also got to get stops, and he's going to be the guy that a lot of the time, whether people hate it or not, he's anchoring that defense, and he's going to be the last line of it. So even if someone else makes a mistake first, you're going to be looking for him to clean some stuff up. You mentioned the Orlando game before. There were a lot of mistakes from other guys on defense, particularly Devin Booker in that game, and Ayton cleaned everything up, and that's how they ended up winning that game. So hopefully we see a little bit more of that from DeAndre Ayton this season, or else we're going to get into some more heated arguments online. But first 10 games, Max, before we round this one out, I want you to give me a win-loss total. We'll run through them one by one. So we've got Sacramento at home.
It's got to be a win if this is going to look reasonable, so I'll say win.
Denver away.
There's no chance they win that game, David.
The Clippers at home without Paul George.
Yeah, even without Paul George, we'll get into this. They're just going to be so deep and good. That's a loss, David.
Utah at home.
It's a loss, David.
Golden State away.
You know what? I'm going to give a surprise win here. Golden State's going to be a really high variance team because they're just going to be all reliant on their shooting, so I'll give them a win there.
Memphis away.
Let's give it a win.
Philly at home.
Ooh, that's a loss.
Miami at home.
I'm going to say loss, David. I really like Miami.
Brooklyn at home.
Let's give them a win there. I think Brooklyn's going to... A lot of people think they're going to start fast. I think they're going to start a little slow and then heat up.
I agree with that. And the Lakers at home. There's a bit of a home streak here to start the season. What do you got for that one?
I feel similarly about the Lakers as the Nets. I think it's going to take them a little while to get going, but I still think we're going to lose because they have LeBron James and Anthony Davis.
Yep. Well, that's 4-6 with a positive view on things, I think, Max. So, point there is it is a pretty hard start to the season, but there are some winnable games and a chance to get on a bit of a streak at home, which would be great. Every coach mentions it. I know Igor even mentioned it last year. You got to protect home court. So, even some of those tougher games that they'll be able to make a bit of a name for themselves if they can beat some of those teams on their home floor, Max.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have one nice thing about it. It's an insanely tough schedule, but they do play some of those new teams that might still be gelling. So that is, they're kind of a new team too, David. So I don't know how much advantage that is, but maybe they can sneak up with some guys. But anyway, let's go on to Did You Know before we get into our league-wide preview.
Let's do it, Max. The other day when the Suns hit 24 threes against Portland, it came up that would have been a record for the franchise had it happened in the regular season. So did you know the record for the Suns for made threes in a real NBA game is 22? It was on November 14, 2010, and couldn't have happened against a better team, a win over the Los Angeles Lakers. But before we get into that, a few more fun facts around the whole NBA when it comes to three-pointers. The NBA record for made threes is currently held by the Houston Rockets from just last season. Any guesses on what the amount of threes made is, Max?
27?
Hey, right on the money.
I think I heard that during the Portland game.
We'll allow it anyway. It came last season on April 7 against none other than the Phoenix Suns, where almost Phoenix Sun Eric Gordon recorded a career-high 8 makes to lead the team. The most combined made threes also came last season, this time on January 16, where the Warriors with 24 and the Pelicans with 19 made a combined 43 for the game. Funnily enough, on the exact same day, the Rockets broke the record for three-point attempts, launching up a total of 70 in a loss to the Nets in overtime, 145 to 142. And despite the Nets only taking 36, the combined amount of 106 is still the most combined taken threes by two teams in an NBA game today. Max, what do you think is the most three-point attempts in a game by a team without making one?
Oh, that's a great question. Let's go with 22.
Wow, on the money again.
Really?
The Nuggets
Wow.
in 2012 against the Blazers, where, surprise, surprise, they lost. The biggest culprit was Andre Iguodala going 0 of 6, I should say. And sidebar here, Max, where does Iggy end up this season?
I'm guessing the Clippers.
Yep, I agree with that. All right, so back to that record-breaking Suns team in 2010 now, Max. It was November 14, 2010, as I mentioned before, and the 5-4 Suns were visiting the Lakers, who had begun 8-2 that season. The score, when it was all said and done, 121 to 116. Max, 6 Suns contributed to the 22 threes from 40 attempts. A very impressive spread for an impressive shooting percentage of 55% for the game. Being 2010, we're essentially in the post 7 seconds or less era with some players left over. So I want you to tell me who the 6 players who hit threes in that game were, or at least a couple of them, Max.
Okay, Steve Nash
took just 3 threes on his way to 21 points, making 2 for the game.
Channing Frye, was he still around?
He was 4 of 9 from downtown, and shout out to Channing for saying Devin Booker is his favorite player to watch just the other day on Twitter.
Love seeing that. Alan Williams doubled down. That was great.
Yep.
Let's go with Jared Dudley.
Yep, JMZ only played 14 minutes, got up 5 from deep, and made sure he made just one of those to feature in this segment.
Jason Richardson, was he still on the team?
He had a game-high 35 points and went an impressive 7 of 10 from deep, Max. You're on a roll here. 2 more to go.
2 more was Dragic. Sorry pronunciation, people.
Came off the bench in this one to take 5 threes and make 3 of them. And you have 1 left. I'd be very impressed if you got it, but hey, you're on a roll, so maybe you can do it for us.
Oh, man. I'm going to say Turkoglu. Was the other team then?
Whoa! Turkoglu went 5 of 7 for the Suns in what was actually his high in the purple and orange, and you have gone 6 for 6, and I believe 8 of 8 for the whole segment.
This is definitely my best Did You Know performance.
Right?
I'm like the Suns against the Trailblazers in preseason right now.
Max, 5 other Suns took the court in that game, with only one of them attempting a 3 but not making it. That player was Grant Hill.
I almost said him.
I won't throw the final harsh question your way, and instead I'll tell you and the listeners the other 4 who didn't attempt a 3 in that game were Robin Lopez, Hakeem Warwick, Josh Childress, and Garrett Seiler. Now, Max, I will leave you and the listeners with one more thing from this game, and then something from the current roster as well. Steve Nash had 13 assists in this one. So a 2-part question for you. Firstly, how many of his 13 assists do you think were for threes?
Oh, God. Let's say 8.
Ooh, very close. The total assists matched his famous number 13, and the assists for threes match our famous number on this pod, which is, of course, 7. Second question. If I told you those 7 assists went to just 2 players that you mentioned before, J. Rich, Hedo, Fry, Goran, and Dudley, and of course he can't assist himself, which 2 players would you choose?
Hedo and Fry.
Ooh, 4 of Richardson's 7 made threes were off direct Nash passes, and you got 1 right with 3 of Hedo's 5. Finally, Max, there are 4 rookies on this roster, and as we know, Ayton also has never made a 3 so far in his NBA career, but you may see where this is going. As we know, and has long been discussed on Suns Twitter and elsewhere, Devin Booker can't quite get over the hump of 6 made threes in a game as his career high. But Max, to end, I want you to tell me which 3 current Suns all share that high of 6 at the moment, and which Sun leads all of them with his own record of 8 makes in a game.
I'm going to guess Rubio randomly has one of those.
Rubio is one of the 3 that have 6. There's 2 more of those.
Frank?
Yep, and 1 more to go.
I don't think Aaron Baines ever made that many. I'll go with, shoot. You got me stumped-tiered a little bit, David. Tyler Johnson.
Wow, you are absolutely killing it in this segment. Now, I'll give you a small clue. Who's the very surprise guy who went 8 for 12 in April last year for another team against the Warriors, and therefore has the record amongst the current Suns?
Against the Warriors? How do I not remember this? Man, I am drawing a blank, David. My performance is over.
It was a deep April game where Javon Carter went 8 for 12.
You could have given me 25 guesses. I wouldn't have gotten there.
So, Max, I'll list them out for you and the listeners to end Did You Know this week in running order. The current Suns' career highs makes are as follows. Carter 8, Booker, Rubio, Johnson and Frank 6, Dario, Kelly and Mikhail 5, Okobo 3, Baines 2, and Diallo 1 for a total of 53. But as you know, we're at episode 65. So I'm going to give you the 12 threes here to make up the difference. And to end the segment, I want you to divide that 12 between Cam, Ty Jerome, and Ayton to round out the roster. When the season is all said and done, what will the game-high 3-point makes for each of those guys be? And bonus points if you can get it to add up to 12, Max.
I actually think we can probably get there because I think Cam's going to get 7 in a game.
I think
crazy.
I could see that.
Let's say Ty gets 4. I could see that too. So I only need one more. I'll give 8 and 1.
There we go. Well, I believe off the top of my head, Cam's 7 makes in his college career was the best he's done, and I think Ty maybe made 6. So you're pretty on the money there, and Ayton, let's hope he makes 1 for the sake of Suns fans that want to see him take and make 1 in the NBA this season. But that is it for Did You Know this week, Max.
I'm issuing a challenge to Mr. Devin Booker right now. You cannot let Javon Carter have a higher career 3-point makes than you. You just can't let that stand. I need to see 10 out of you this season, Booker, in one game. Come on, let's see it. All right, David, let's move into our league-wide preview. We're going to start with the Western Conference, the conference closest to our hearts. I think we're going to do this, maybe give should we do 3 at a time, 4 at a time, and then talk about what we think?
I've got them in little groups here, but mostly 3 or 4 at a time. So I think we can roll with that.
All right, you give me your group let's start from the bottom, and then I will tell you if I have any differences. Let's do it that way.
All right. Well, I have one giant group from the bottom in the West here, Max, which was my main overarching point here that I was alluding to before with the Suns. Is it's really hard to see any of these teams, separating themselves from the pack, particularly early on. So I'll go 3 at a time so you can match up here with me. I've got Memphis last in the West. I've got a bit of a surprise one with OKC 14th and Minnesota 13th, Max.
That's hilarious. I have the Grizzlies last 25 wins, the Timberwolves second to last 30 wins, and the OKC Thunder third to last 33. So we see it pretty close, I think. I think maybe I'm a little lower on the Grizzlies than you.
Yeah. I just think, they're the clear the worst team in the league. Minnesota, maybe.
In the West. I'm going to clarify that there. They're the worst team in the West,
yes.
clearly.
Yes, sorry. Minnesota maybe have the best player in this kind of grouping of non-playoff teams. I'll throw that at you now, quickly. How many players are better than Devin Booker in the bottom tier of your teams? I've got Karl Anthony Towns, and I'm not sure I can find a second one, Max.
Closest one would be Chris Paul. Maybe, but I don't think so. So I would go, just Towns. And listen, it won't shock me if Booker starts getting in that conversation this season. Let's just say that. Yeah,
and that's a great segue for OKC as well, because I'm actually really high on their current roster, and I could see them actually being a bit of a plucky surprise team. But I just expect Presti to hit the eject button at some point and tank them all the way down by the end of the season. So that's why they're super low.
It just makes so much sense, right? And they also have guys people want, right? They have Gallinari, they have Adams. Those guys are going to draw interest, and then obviously the Chris Paul thing could happen. But it just makes too much sense for them. They're a rebuilding mode. They're building around Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They need to get rid of Chris Paul at some point. It just makes all the sense in the world. I know they want to. It's just not the easiest thing to do because his contract's so big. But I agree with you though. I think if they kept this roster all season long, I actually would have them a little higher. I might have them around 40 wins because I just think it's a really good roster. But it's not going to be the same thing in February.
Yeah, I agree. Now, 12th through 9th here, I've got Phoenix, Sacramento, Dallas, and the New Orleans Pelicans just missing out on the playoffs, Max. And the only thing I'll say there is I think there's scenarios where Phoenix could be better than this entire group of non-playoff teams, which was actually a bit of a surprise to me when I sat down to kind of write these rankings out. So even though I have them in 12th, I think we're going to see really close bunches here. I think last year, 39 wins got you the 9th seed, 36 wins got you the 11th seed, and 33 wins got you anywhere between 12th and 14th. So that pretty much is in line with my win prediction total of 33, but that high variance total that I gave in terms of their ceiling, as I said, I could see them being the 9th best team in the West.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be close. I actually have Suns 12 as well, but I have them a little closer to the OKC range. I have them at 35 wins, as I said before. And the next 3 teams I actually have all in the 40s, low 40s. And then we'll get to it later, but then my next 3 teams are all in the low 40s too. So I just think this is going to be this massive group here. I have Pelicans 11th at 40 wins. Before the Zion news, I would have had them in the playoffs. I'm just nervous about him. I just don't think he's going to stay healthy this season. It sucks so much. It makes me so sad because I think that was going to be the most fun team in the league. And maybe they still will be, but man, opening night, not having Zion in that first game, how much of a bummer is that, David?
That's rough. They're probably pretty glad that they already sold that one out many weeks ago, I'm pretty sure. Because, everyone was waiting for Zion. I think that's going to be a storyline all year. Hopefully not all his career. But, I maybe would have even thought about keeping JJ Redick's playoff streak alive and putting him in the playoffs if Zion was healthy to start the season. Did you know that he's never missed the playoffs, Max?
Zion or JJ Redick?
JJ Redick has never missed the playoffs. It's ridiculous.
That is pretty damn impressive on 3 different teams. That's actually amazing. All right, I'll go into my number 10. My number 10 is a surprise, David. I have the Portland Trailblazers at number 10 with 42 wins.
Ooh.
And I have the Dallas Mavericks at number 9 also with 42 wins.
I like it. I've snuck Portland in, and they're in a little group, which we can get into here in a minute. But I think they're really vulnerable and super thin if you look at their kind of ins and outs. So, they're only one bad luck thing to start the season away from falling right where you've got them, I think, Max. So I think that's a great call. I didn't have the balls to do it, but I think you're right on the money in terms of their vulnerability at the bottom of those rankings in the West.
I didn't want to do it because I just trust in Dame and CJ so much, but they don't really have a small forward, David. I guess Kent Bazemore kind of, but man, that team, their wings. I think people underrate how much Aminu and Harkless did for them. Neither one's like a superstar or anything, but they just give you a lot of depth. They don't have that anymore, and also the Whiteside thing. I don't like Hassan Whiteside. If Nurkic were going to be healthy all season, I would feel a lot better about this team. Man, I think their defense is going to suck. It's going to take a lot from Damian and CJ. If they suffer a Damian and CJ or CJ injury, they're going to be in trouble. And then the Mavericks, I wanted to... go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't look good for them at the end with the postseason, even if they do sneak in, because Dame and CJ, as you said, are going to have a massive load during the season. Yeah,
and then the Mavericks, I like Luka. I like Porzingis. I don't like very much else. A good question was brought up on the Bill Simmons podcast and their Over Under podcast about who's the 3rd best player in the Dallas Mavericks. It's really hard to find that out. I don't know. They said Seth Curry. I don't think it's Seth Curry. If it's Seth Curry, they're in trouble. But we'll see. Luka and Porzingis are going to need to play near 82 games and be awesome if this team's making the playoffs. But I have them 42, right below my next team at 43, so I don't think they're that far off.
Yeah, I mean, I think the argument's probably there for Tim Hardaway Jr., which is just as gross. So, I think you're right. The top 2 really good. Porzingis' health, obviously, the main thing to watch there. But, I had them in 10th as well. So, we're pretty much on the same page here. Outside of, I guess, you having another team in the playoffs and Portland out of it.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and go to my grouping of the next 3. So I have the Kings at 43 wins in the playoffs. I have the Spurs at 43 wins as the 7th seed. And I have the Warriors with 44 wins, 6th seed. So I really see these teams bunched up. I know you don't want the Kings and you have the Blazers in, but are you kind of similar here?
Yeah, so I've got the Spurs 8th, Portland 7th, and the Golden State Warriors 6th. I've actually got the Warriors in my next grouping, which we'll get to in a minute. But Portland and the Spurs together at 7 and 8. As I said before, just didn't have the balls to write either of them off. But I think the Spurs look pretty vulnerable in terms of age. You can lean on your vets, but they can also come back to bite you a little bit. So they might be leaning on guys like DeJounte Murray and Derek White a little bit too much during the season. And we've already gone over Portland, just super thin. So I think they're one, as I said, injury or something away from falling out of the playoffs and things being wide open at the bottom of the West. And I agree with you, Golden State 6, which I can, I guess, segue into my next one. I've got the Lakers 5th and the Clippers 4th. So that grouping there, they're all kind of health permitting teams and nightmare low seed matchups come playoff time. If the Clippers, the Lakers, and Golden State Warriors are sitting in those kind of 4 through 6 spots, all healthy, who have you got? When the playoffs come, Max, out of those 3 teams, who's the most dangerous?
The Clippers, definitely, and we'll get to some playoff and also title predictions later. But I like the Clippers. I'll say that. I want to say one quick thing on the Spurs. I don't like their roster very much. I'm not picking against the Spurs to make the playoffs, David. I'm just not going to do it. Respect Popovich.
Exactly.
And also the one thing on the Warriors real quick, they're fascinating. They're like the most fascinating team in the whole league to me. I just can't wait to see what D'Angelo Russell looks like on that team. I really want to see if Marquise Chris is actually going to play a role on that team, because that would be hilarious. We'll see about that. I'm still skeptical, David. But you had Lakers 5, right?
I did.
I have Lakers 5 as well. I have them with 50 wins. So this is it really jumps up here for me. And then I have the Nuggets 4th with 53 wins. I like that, both these teams, a lot. I actually like the Lakers more as a playoff team and the Nuggets more as a regular season team. And, those are high win totals. I think the Lakers will, anytime Anthony Davis or LeBron doesn't play, they're going to be in a lot of trouble because their roster sucks besides those two. But, on the other hand, those two are ridiculous. And I don't know if you catch any of their preseason, David, but they are going to be good together. I'm going to go ahead and spoiler alert. They're going to be good together. So that's going to be fearsome. They could beat anybody. And then the Nuggets they're just kind of a machine at this point on offense. I may have even kind of undersold them a little bit. I just like the other teams even better. But, yeah, that's going to be a good team.
Yeah, I kind of alluded to this before, but my top 3 teams I probably like less in the playoffs than my next 3 with the Clippers, Lakers, and a fully healthy Warriors team. So yeah, it really comes down here to where we're ranking, I guess, how the season itself is going to play out with the overall playoff seedings. And then, as you said, you're going to throw to some questions which might help me pump up the tires of a few of these teams that I've ranked lower. I just think the Clippers will, rest Paul George and Kawhi quite a bit. The Lakers, as you said, would be smart to do the same with LeBron and Davis at times, so they're peaking at the right end. So I've got Utah 3. I had Denver, who I believe you had at 4 as my number 2 team, and I've got Houston as the regular season champions in the West, Max.
Not far off from you. I have the Jazz 3rd with 54 wins, so just above the Nuggets. Then I have the Clippers in there with 55 wins. I think that might surprise some people. The reason why I did that is because this team, without Kawhi and Paul George, won, 48 last season?
They were really fucking good.
Yeah, they don't really need those guys to win games. I mean, they need them to be elite, but they can win games without both those guys. And I think at least while Paul George is out, Kawhi is probably going to play almost every single game, just because they kind of need him right now. But man, even when those two both don't play, they could win games. And I think when those two play, they're going to be maybe the best team in the league. So it's really just I just think they're going to stumble into 55 wins. I don't think they even have to push for it. And then I think I've said this before on Twitter and podcasts. I agree with you on Houston. I have them at 60 wins. They're just going to be awesome in the regular season. James Harden and Russell Westbrook are just going to be really, really good. They're going to be staggered, and they're going to be impossible. Bad teams will never beat them, David.
Yep, I totally agree. Who do you trust the most in the playoffs out of my top 3 here with Houston, Denver, and Utah?
Probably Houston, actually, weirdly. So I'll start by saying I agree with you. I don't really trust any of them. I don't think those are the ones that are going to win it all, but I think I could really see Houston, because they're the 1 seed, say they get, in my scenario, the Kings, and then maybe they get the Nuggets. I think they can sneak into the Western Conference Finals just because of good seeding. Yeah,
I agree with you on that. And we can probably jump over to the East. Not sure how low you want to drop down here because it is a disaster at the bottom of the East, Max.
Let's start at the top this time, and then we'll see how we're feeling at the end. It's fun to make fun of, but I don't want to spend too much time on it. I'll start with my top 3. I think we're going to share top 2, right? We're going to, in some order, the Sixers and the Bucks. I have the Sixers ahead of them, but which order do you have that?
Yep, I had Milwaukee 1, Philadelphia 2.
I thought about it a lot. I'm a little nervous about the Bledsoe injury thing. They're a little not as deep as they were before without Brogdon and all that stuff. I'm talking about the Bucks now. And the Sixers, I think, are just going to be suffocating. Their defense alone is going to win them a bunch of games. So I see them in like the high 50s range, and the Bucks just shortly behind them. They're both going to be awesome.
Yeah, I know the Bucks lost Brogdon, but I kind of went with I guess less change in Milwaukee than Philly. Obviously, Butler going out is a pretty massive change, and Horford coming in with Josh Richardson with the other major change, I guess, in Philly. So I think they got a little bit more to work out, whereas Milwaukee should just hit the ground running, so to speak. So who do you have in that third spot? You've kind of alluded to maybe being different to me, so I'm guessing maybe you're picking a bit of a surprise?
Definitely, yeah. Surprise pick. I have the Miami Heat third, which I think is going to be very surprising to a lot of people. I think Jimmy Butler is going to have just an awesome kick-ass year. First of all, he's just a great player, and I think he's like where he wants to be finally. He is a team that really fits his MO, which is just, grind your ass off, play awesome defense, try, literally fight like for your life on every possession sort of thing. I love Bam Adebayo. He looks incredible in preseason. Oh my God, he's going to be a revelation. I think Goran Dragic, if he's good. They have a trade to make too. I think I could see them being a Lowry team and, or Chris Paul team. I just think they're going to be really, really scrappy and good. And also Tyler Hero has looked really good in the preseason. There's a lot I like about this team, David. They're trending in the right direction.
Yeah, they're chippy. Other than Dion Waiters getting himself suspended for the first game, there's a lot to like about that. I think it kind of sits in. I've got Toronto third, but I was quite high, I believe, this time last year on Toronto, and ended up being right with them. Eventually winning the championship. But I remember it was. I did put the caveat that it was based on them making a move, which they eventually did with Marc Gasol. So I think you're right. Miami could be the third best team in the East, even without making a change. But specifically, if they do make a move, then I could really lean into that pick for you.
Yep, and I'm with you on the Raptors. I had them 4. So I think they're going to be slept on a little bit, but they still got a lot of guys in that team who are great players who just won a championship. Kyle Lowry is obviously great. Marc Gasol, Pascal Siakam just got a max. What do you think about that, David? I thought that was a really interesting extension.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of expected. I don't think, I think there was maybe rumors they were going to try and get him for a little bit cheaper, but, that was kind of what they had to do. But I got a question for you without notice here. Sure. Siakam is the what best player in the East?
Oh, wow, that's an interesting question. Just looking down.
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, I don't think he's in the top 10, David. I think he's like a very fringe top 10. What do you think?
Well, you've got, just going down the list here, you've got obviously Giannis in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
You could probably argue that Embiid and Simmons are both better than him in Philadelphia.
You could even argue Horford is better than him.
Potentially. Miami, obviously, Jimmy Butler, as you mentioned before. Boston's an intriguing one. I'd probably take Siakam. Oh, I guess Kemba Walker.
I'd take Kemba,
yeah. It's probably a better bet. So, yeah, you're still banking on a little bit of projection here with Siakam being able to take his game to another level, which we're going to find out very, very quickly without Kawhi Leonard in town, because Siakam's going to have the best defender on him all the time now, particularly out of big guys. So it's going to be really interesting with that extension to see how he goes to start the season.
Yeah, it's one of the more fascinating things. It's like the only reason to tune into opening night, honestly, now that Zion's not playing. that and Lonzo Ball, 3-point marksman, what I'll be watching for. But I have the Boston Celtics 5th, David. Do you as well?
I had them 4th, so I've got Miami 5th.
Okay, got it.
But I agree with you in terms of Miami being good this season, that's for sure.
So Boston's really interesting to me. I think they're going to be pretty good on offense. I think the defense is going to be a disaster. They don't Al Horford, Enes Kanter downgrade that's a real downgrade, David.
Yes.
They're very, very reliant on Gordon Hayward or Jason Tatum being an awesome wing playmaker. One of those guys has to do that, or else they're going to be kind of in trouble. I think they're going to be good just because they have a lot of talent, but I don't know. People are very rosy about them. I don't totally see it.
Yeah, the big rotation is pretty rough in Boston at the moment. I saw some people say maybe Sabonis would be worthy, with that news with Indiana, who I'm sure we're going to get to in a minute. But, I think you're right with Hayward. I think he's the swing guy here in terms of whether they're a really good team in the East or just an average team where we've got them, I guess, at the moment.
They're another trade to make team. That's the Steven Adams destination. It's written all over it. They need to go get Steven Adams.
Yes, I'd agree with that one too.
Number 6 and 7 and 8. I'll do all 3 of these, and we'll see if we share it. Maybe a bit of a surprise here. I have the Magic 6, the really good defensive team. Bulls 7, maybe a surprise. And then I have the Nets 8.
All right, we do differ a little bit. So I've got the Pacers 6, Orlando 7, and Detroit 8.
Okay. Yeah, so let's talk about the Pacers. I think that's the most interesting thing. I have them 9. I don't think Oladipo is going to come back 100% right away. That was a really nasty injury he suffered.
Yeah.
I really don't like the whole Sabonis Turner thing. And now they have Batatse playing well behind them. Like maybe they can get away with a good trade of Sabonis, but as the roster stands right now, David, that situation makes me nervous.
Yeah, I agree. And you never want to start the season with those rumors and things kind of floating over your head, particularly because, I put probably 6 through 10, and I think the 2 teams you threw up there in Brooklyn and Chicago, I've got at 9 and 10. You could put a blanket out of, over all of those teams before you get to, the dud teams from 11 through 15, I think. So, the biggest surprise from that group, hard to say. I'd almost wanted to lean just with the star power on Detroit and Brooklyn with Blake and Kyrie, but, health is obviously a big call with both of those as well. So, I think we're on the same page with Orlando getting themselves in there, just with a deep, good team, well-coached team. And then, anything could happen from there. But, I just kind of went with some teams that I trust a little bit more than others, I suppose.
Yeah, I threw the Pistons in at 10, so I'm with you. That's the next tier. I'm just nervous about Blake Griffin. You brought it up. He had a really awesome season last year, but he even had a little bit of injury stuff go on. And I could see a lot of injury stuff go on with him. So if they lose him for a certain amount of time, they're going to be bad.
Yeah, and when he's on the Suns halfway through the year, Detroit will therefore be very, very bad, Max.
God, I hope so, man. From your lips to James Jones' ears. And then just real quickly on the Bulls, I just want to mention that I just love their roster, David. They have a lot of guys who I like. Satoransky, obviously, I like. Thad Young, I thought was kind of a weird signing, but when I look at it now, it's nice. It's going to make them a lot better. And then the whole Wendell Carter, Lauri Markkanen thing is really, really interesting to me.
Yeah, really nice mix of good young players that will contribute to winning basketball, and then some heady vets. So I definitely tinkered with putting them in there, but just don't trust them. I guess like I don't trust the Phoenix Suns to make a major leap, Max.
Yep, fair enough. I guess I kind of see them similarly. Yeah, it's just one plays in the East, one plays in the West. It's probably why I have it like that. All right, I see a tier of one team, David, at number 11, and that is the Atlanta Hawks. I think they're going to be pretty damn good offensively. I think they're going to be a disaster defensively.
Yep, I don't disagree entirely. I've actually got the Knicks at 11 just because I think they've got a lot of, decent contributing players on the team. And I just see this, I've got them as all one group. I'll just rattle them off. The Knicks, the Hawks, the Wizards, the Hornets, and Cleveland last. I think you could put them in any order and potentially end up being right by the end of the year, Max.
Yeah, I had the Wizards next, just kind of out of respect for Bradley Beal. That roster's awful. Besides him, though, if he misses time, they're the worst team in the league, probably. The Knicks, I had 13. I see where you're going with that because I do think they have some good players on their team, but I hate the fit of all of them. I think there's already some grouching going on apparently there. That's what the reporting's saying, so that's not great. I don't think I don't think Fizdale is going to do a good job there. I just don't really like him. I don't like what I'm hearing about him not possibly starting Mitchell Robinson. I don't like a lot of what I'm hearing from them. So it's kind of like I just see that it's situation being a disaster and maybe some trades being made. And then the Hornets and the Cavs are hilarious.
The only thing I'd add in there is obviously the Igor thing didn't go all that well, but thank God we got Monty Williams and not David Fizdale. That's all I'm going to say. I think he's a bit of a disaster.
I don't like Fizdale. It seems like he fights with his players a lot, which seems counterproductive. Hornets and Cavs. The Hornets and Cavs are going to be like the teams that when they're on, you don't watch. I'm not going to watch the Hornets and Cavs when they play each other. I refuse. That's going to be the game that Zach Lowe makes fun of in his articles.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
All right, so let's get into a little bit of playoff stuff. So I guess let's start with the East since we just did it. Who do you see making the conference finals in the East?
I can't go past Milwaukee, Philadelphia. I just think other than one of these teams making a big move, as we discussed before, which is pretty hard to predict, I'm going to go with those two. Yeah,
it would take an injury for somebody like the Heat or the Raptors to sneak in, I think. But I agree with you. I mean, Giannis rules the East, and the Sixers are absolutely loaded. I've thought so much about who I'm going to pick between those two teams, David. I love them both. I think it's like a 6 or 7 gamer. I think the Sixers are a bad matchup for Milwaukee. But I have so much faith in Giannis Antetokounmpo that I think I'm going to go with Milwaukee, actually, David.
Yeah, I'm sticking with Milwaukee. Philly's going to be really interesting to watch during the regular season, but it's just really hard to see them ever getting the pieces right. I saw a great clip from Ryan Russillo from I think it must have been from the Bill Simmons pod where he just talked about the, Ben Simmons Embiid combo and who's taking their shots where and how off it is just in terms of balance. I think he said
Yes.
something like Embiid taking 480 shots outside the paint last season or something like that, and Ben Simmons only taking a dozen or whatever. So that is already something that they haven't been able to get right, and then they've thrown Al Horford into the mix. So then the mix between him and Embiid and staggering their minutes and things like that is just I just think for playoff basketball, again, I'm going to go with the team that seems to already have shit figured out, and they know who their best player is, and they know how to build around it. And I'm just going to go with the Bucks. It's a safe, boring pick, but
I think it's the right one. But the Sixers thing is so interesting because I totally agree with you. I see them grinding to a halt in the playoffs offensively, but then I look on the other side of it, and Giannis having to go up against those three frontline guys all the time, Embiid, Simmons, and Horford throughout the game. And they have great perimeter defenders now. They're just going to be a beast to play against. They're going to set up a giant wall for Giannis. So I kind of see those games to be a little bit throwback rock fighty. All the defense first guys are going to love that series, I think.
Yeah, Philly are going to suffocate teams, that's for sure, because you throw Josh Richardson in there as well.
Yeah.
They've got a pretty formidable starting five in terms of defense. But playoffs, whole nother beast. But you do make a good point. Giannis going up against that's going to be pretty great for the neutrals to watch anyway.
So I'll start with my West Conference Finals. I think the best teams in the West in the playoffs are going to be the Lakers and the Clippers. However, I think the way seeding works out, I think they'll play each other earlier. So I actually think, as I said earlier, Houston will make it to the conference finals, and they will lose there to the Los Angeles Clippers, David.
I think we are on the same page with this one because I've got the Clippers and Lakers at 4 and 5, so I can't exactly pick both of them to go through to the finals because they're going to play each other in the first round if I keep things consistent. And Houston, the 1 seed, should get a pretty easy way through to the finals, but I definitely would see them losing to a healthy Clippers team. So Clippers Bucks, Max.
Yep, Clippers Bucks, we both got it. Who do you got winning it?
I just love the Clippers story. It's just a great get for them in the offseason to overhaul their whole roster after a really plucky team beforehand with no stars on it. So I'm going to go Clippers beating Milwaukee in 6 or 7, Max.
Yep, I agree. I think the Clippers win it. I will say, though, if I had to bet money on a team to win the title this year, I would bet on Milwaukee probably because I think the West is going to be harder to get out of. The Bucks have to just beat one team, but I do think the best team in the league is the Clippers, and they should be the champion if they make it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And it's quite a good thing to... I had another note if I had to bet on someone. I think it was with that star power of Detroit and Brooklyn before, just because, if you're actually using your own money, your thought process goes a little bit differently. And I think, with the weakness of the East and I guess the consistency, as I keep saying, with Milwaukee, I definitely agree with you on that. You'd kind of be leaning Milwaukee if you were spending your actual money and not fantasy podcast money here, Max.
All right. Are we ready for 7 seconds or less?
I'm ready. We haven't done a full-blown one for a while, so hit me.
Alrighty, 7 seconds or less. The segment where one of us asks the other 3 questions for which the other has not prepared and only has 7 seconds or less to answer. I'm asking the questions this week. David, what are you most excited for the Phoenix Suns season? What one particular thing are you most excited to see?
I think the chemistry has been great this off-season and this preseason. The Valley Boys shop even was a window into that the other day. So I'm just excited to see, what seems to be a very fun team with the full support behind them. And for them to get a little bit chirpy. We kind of saw it in little stages last year. And I think if they get a few wins on the board early, I think they could be... a real cocky, we know that Booker loves to chat. Oubre, gets people's interest with his, maneuvering on the court and certain things that he does body language wise. So I think they could be, the chirpiest team in the West and the team that you don't want to come up against night to night, Max. That's what I'd be excited for.
Love that answer. It's better than my answer, which is Ty Jerome. All right, similar question, but as we do on this podcast, this is for the league-wide. What are you most excited for around the league, not the Suns?
It's a boring answer, Max, but all the duos now and health being such a big thing as we've just run through with all of the teams in the East and the West, I think that's the storyline, is which duo is going to be healthy at the right time of the year. And I guess the chemistry, there's a lot of new duos here. Russ and Harden, Kawhi and PG. I could see things not actually going all that well with the Clippers with that scenario if things, went a certain way. Davis and LeBron, as you said, the Warriors, if they get Clay back, I guess that's still a big three of sorts. And, Philly have got what they've got going on in the East as well. So that's it for me. It's a boring answer again, but, all those duos, particularly the ones out West and in particular in LA, I think is going to be a massive storyline that we're never going to be able to get away from during the year.
No, that's going to dominate the entire media sphere, Twitter sphere, blah, blah, blah. Mine is seeing what the Warriors are going to be like, especially early on. I'm just fascinated by their roster because it's so bad. And I just want to see if Steph Curry and Draymond Green can carry it and how much D'Angelo Russell helps. I'm just fascinated by it in general. All right, what prediction that you made on this podcast are you most confident about?
Ooh, that is a very good question. I am very, very, very confident that the Houston Rockets will lead the West for wins in the regular season, Max.
You stole my answer, David. That is what I'm most confident about as well. So it's going to be fun to do this podcast in about a month when Houston's like 7-10 or something like that.
Yeah, people will come at us for how dumb we are and stick to the Suns. But I guess to give it a Suns flavor, I'm very confident that the starting lineup on night one will be Rubio, Booker, Kelly, Saric, and Ayton as well, Max.
Yep, so am I. I guess for a Suns one for me, I'm confident that Devin Booker is good.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure. All right, that is it for us. Please, as always, rate, review, and subscribe. It really helps. David, I believe you have a few reviews you want to read.
I did. I set the challenge earlier in the off-season of getting to the magic 100 number of 5 stars before the season starts. We're a little short, but there's still time, guys. We're 94 5 stars. So if there's 6 guys out there or girls listening to this podcast that want to throw us 5 stars, please do, like these 3 guys did. I'm going to start off with Titan J, who said, I started listening to Suns podcast back in April because I was tired of the radio focusing on the Cardinals and my commute had doubled in time. David and Max have the best chemistry and I always prioritize this podcast over others. Thank you for making my commute that much better and can't wait to listen when it's not the off-season. And we can't wait to pod when it's not the off-season, Titan. So thanks very much for that. Now we get to the really funny 2 that we got in September and October, Max. And this is hilarious. But Max36884, which I can confirm is not Max McCauley, who hosts this podcast, said, I've been listening to you guys along with about 5 other Phoenix Suns based podcasts for about a year now. Sorry for not rating you guys earlier, and I can with certainly say that this is by far the best Phoenix Suns podcast. You guys are both very entertaining and informing. Keep up the good work, and I can't wait to listen to your podcast when we actually start winning more than 25 games. Max, are you sure that wasn't you?
I think if I was going to make a burner to review my own podcast, I probably would not use my own first name.
And this is where it gets really ridiculous, but the next review is from another generic David4711, who just said thanks for all the great content and gave us 5 stars and said this is my favorite Suns podcast. And I can confirm, as hilarious as it is, that isn't a burner for me either. So that was the fun thing that I alluded to last episode with a Max and a David giving us very complimentary reviews, Max.
The best part is that not only was it just our names, but they had the same structure. It was our names and like a bunch of random numbers. This is great.
I love it. Absolutely.
That's awesome. All right, everybody. Thank you very much.